The most profitable companies in human history no longer sell products. They sell attention. And attention is no longer just a business model. It's infrastructure. Because somewhere along the way, your boredom became illegal, silence became uncomfortable, and your mind slowly stopped belonging to you. Most people think addiction looks dramatic. Alcohol, drugs, casinos. But modern addiction is quieter than that. It looks like waking up and instantly checking your phone before your own thoughts arrive. It looks like opening TikTok for 5 minutes and realizing an hour disappeared. It looks like watching YouTube while eating, while texting, while scrolling another app at the same time. It looks like feeling exhausted all day, then somehow unable to stop consuming more content at night. And the disturbing part is, this isn't happening accidentally. Some of the smartest people on earth are working every day to make sure you never leave the screen. Not because they hate you, but because your attention is worth more than oil, more than gold, more than your actual happiness. Because in the modern economy, human focus became the most valuable resource on the planet. And once you understand how this system really works, you start noticing something terrifying. Almost every app you use, every feed you scroll, every notification you hear, every algorithm that knows you was engineered to psychologically condition your behavior, not to help you live, but to keep you consuming forever. And maybe that explains why so many people feel emotionally numb now, why millions feel constantly stimulated but deeply empty, why people are more connected than ever, yet unbearably lonely. Because this isn't just technology anymore. It's an ecosystem designed around human dependency. And most people are trapped inside it without realizing it. The strange thing is, the internet once felt hopeful. In the early 2000s, technology felt empowering, optimistic, almost innocent. The future looked exciting. Social media promised connection. Smartphones promised convenience. Streaming promised entertainment without limits. Everything was supposed to make life easier. And technically, it did. But something else happened at the same time, very slowly. Human beings stopped consuming technology, and technology started consuming human beings. Not physically, psychologically, because every platform eventually discovered the same brutal truth. The longer they keep your attention, the more money they make. That single realization quietly reshaped the entire internet. Suddenly, apps weren't competing to improve your life. They were competing to hijack your nervous system. And once that happened, everything changed. Look at modern platforms closely. Netflix autoplays the next episode before you can think. TikTok removes stopping points completely. Instagram gives variable social rewards. YouTube perfects recommendation loops. Even food delivery apps use dopamine anticipation mechanics similar to gambling systems. None of this is random. It's behavioral engineering. And the scary part is, most people still think they're making free choices. But addiction becomes infinitely more powerful when it feels voluntary. Casinos figured this out decades ago. That's why casinos have no clocks, no windows, no natural sense of time. The goal is psychological immersion. You stop noticing reality. Modern technology does the exact same thing. Infinite scrolling was one of the most psychologically destructive inventions ever created. Because the human brain relies on stopping cues. Books end. Movies end. Meals end. But feeds don't end. There's always another post, another video, another outrage, another dopamine hit waiting underneath your thumb, which means your brain never receives closure. Only anticipation, and anticipation is where addiction grows strongest. Psychologists discovered something important a long time ago. Dopamine isn't actually about pleasure, it's about pursuit, the craving itself, the possibility of reward. That's why people often feel worse after binge scrolling, not better. Because the brain was never satisfied. It was trapped in an endless cycle of seeking, refreshing, checking, hoping. Maybe the next post will make me feel something. Maybe the next video will finally relax me. Maybe the next notification will validate me. But it never lasts, because platforms are not designed to satisfy you. Satisfied users leave. Addicted users stay. And that changes everything, especially when billions of dollars are involved. Today, the attention economy is one of the largest industries on Earth. Entire corporations are built around maximizing something called engagement time, which sounds harmless, until you realize engagement often means emotional manipulation. Fear keeps people watching. Anger increases comments. Outrage boosts sharing. Controversy drives retention. Algorithms learn this very quickly, not because machines are evil, but because machines optimize outcomes without morality. If rage keeps users online longer, the algorithm naturally promotes rage. If insecurity increases engagement, the system amplifies insecurity. And suddenly the internet starts feeling emotionally exhausting all the time, because your nervous system was never built to process this much stimulation. Think about how unnatural modern life actually is. For almost all of human history, people lived in small tribes. Limited information, limited comparison, limited social pressure. Now your brain absorbs thousands of human lives every day. Millionaires, influencers, political chaos, war footage, beauty standards, celebrity lifestyles, economic anxiety, productivity culture, doomsday predictions, all before breakfast, and somehow society acts surprised that people feel mentally overwhelmed. The average person now experiences more information in one day than previous generations experienced in months. But the human brain did not evolve this quickly, which creates a strange psychological contradiction. People are consuming more stimulation than ever, while feeling less alive than ever, because overstimulation eventually produces emotional numbness. And numbness is becoming one of the defining emotions of modern society. People laugh less deeply, focus less intensely, feel less present. Everything becomes fragmented. Half attention, half emotions, half experiences. Even entertainment doesn't feel entertaining anymore. People watch shows while scrolling other apps because a single stimulus no longer feels sufficient. That should terrify us, because when constant stimulation becomes normal, stillness starts feeling painful. And once a society becomes afraid of silence, it becomes extremely easy to control. This is where the business model becomes darker than most people realize. Technology companies don't just compete for your time. They compete against reality itself. Every moment you spend offline is a moment they can't monetize, which means the ideal consumer is someone permanently connected, emotionally reactive, constantly scrolling, always consuming, a human being whose inner world has been replaced by external stimulation. And honestly, that describes millions of people now. You can see it everywhere. Friends sitting together while staring at separate screens. Couples in restaurants silently scrolling. People recording experiences instead of living them. Entire generations forgetting how to be alone with their own thoughts. But maybe the most disturbing consequence isn't distraction. It's identity collapse. Because social media didn't just change communication. It changed self-perception. For the first time in history, human beings started experiencing themselves as personal brands. Not people. Brands, curated personalities, filtered lifestyles, performative emotions. Even authenticity became performative. People don't simply live anymore. They document, optimize, package, broadcast, and slowly, the line between real identity and digital identity begins disappearing. That's why so many people feel strangely disconnected from themselves now. They're managing a public version of themselves constantly, a version designed for approval. Likes became social currency. Followers became status. Virality became validation. And once external validation becomes your emotional foundation, you become psychologically fragile, because platforms profit from insecurity. Confident people consume less. People who feel incomplete buy more things, click more videos, stay online longer, compare themselves endlessly. The system quietly depends on emotional dissatisfaction. That's why social media often creates emotional problems, then sells temporary relief from those same problems. Feel unattractive? Here's beauty content. Feel unsuccessful? Here's hustle culture. Feel lonely? Here's parasocial relationships. Feel anxious? Consume more distraction. Everything becomes cyclical, and the cycle never ends, because the product isn't content. The product is human attention itself. Your emotions are monetized. Your fears are monetized. Your loneliness is monetized. Even your boredom is monetized, especially your boredom. Because boredom used to serve an important psychological purpose. It created reflection, creativity, self-awareness. Some of humanity's greatest ideas emerged from silence and mental wandering. Now boredom gets interrupted within seconds. Waiting in line? Check your phone. Using the bathroom? Check your phone. Sitting quietly? Impossible. Modern society eliminated nearly every empty moment from human existence. And without empty moments, people slowly lose contact with themselves. That might explain why so many people feel existentially lost now. Not because humans suddenly became weak, but because modern systems continuously prevent introspection. Constant distraction protects people from uncomfortable thoughts. Am I happy? Do I actually enjoy my life? Who am I without stimulation? What am I running from? Those questions require silence, and silence became rare because a distracted population is incredibly profitable. The more emotionally unsettled people feel, the more they consume. And nowhere is this more obvious than modern advertising. Advertising used to sell products. Now it sells identities. You're not buying shoes, you're buying status. You're not buying skincare, you're buying desirability. You're not buying productivity apps, you're buying the fantasy of becoming a better person. Modern marketing understands psychology better than most people understand themselves. Because corporations spend billions studying human behavior, your impulses, your insecurities, your habits, your attention span, your emotional triggers. Every click teaches the system more about you, sometimes more than you know about yourself. And AI is making this infinitely more powerful. Algorithms are becoming emotionally predictive. They know what keeps you watching, what makes you angry, what makes you insecure, what makes you stay. And once machines learn human psychology at scale, attention stops feeling like a marketplace. It starts feeling like psychological surveillance, which raises an uncomfortable question. If corporations can influence human behavior this effectively, how much free will are people actually exercising online? Because most modern consumption doesn't feel intentional anymore. It feels compulsive, automatic. People open apps without thinking, reach for phones during tiny moments of discomfort, scroll during movies, during conversations, even during driving, not because they consciously want to, but because the behavior became neurologically conditioned. That's what addiction really is. A loop repeated so many times, it starts bypassing conscious choice. And maybe the darkest part is this: many people no longer remember what their minds felt like before constant stimulation, before fragmented attention, before algorithmic dependency. An entire generation grew up inside systems specifically designed to manipulate behavior, which means many people mistake addiction for normality. They think exhaustion is normal, brain fog is normal, anxiety is normal, emotional numbness is normal, constant distraction is normal. But human beings were not designed to live like this. The brain needs depth, stillness, undivided attention, real human connection. But modern systems fragment all of it, and fragmented people become easier to influence. That's why outrage spreads faster than nuance online. Nuance requires attention, outrage requires reaction, and reaction is profitable. So the internet slowly became emotionally extreme. Everything is urgent, everything is catastrophic, everything demands immediate opinion, which keeps people emotionally activated constantly. Fear, anger, comparison, desire. An overstimulated nervous system becomes highly predictable. And predictable humans are incredibly valuable economically. This is why many people feel strangely exhausted despite doing nothing. Mental energy is being extracted all day long. Every notification steals attention residue. Every algorithmic interruption fractures focus. Every comparison drains emotional stability. People are cognitively overloaded before noon. Then they blame themselves for lacking motivation. But burnout isn't always caused by work anymore. Sometimes burnout comes from perpetual consumption. Too much information, too much stimulation, too many artificial emotional triggers, and almost no psychological recovery. Even sleep doesn't fully restore people now, because the mind never truly powers down. There's always another feed waiting, another crisis, another distraction, another dopamine cycle, and eventually, people stop feeling like human beings. They start feeling like terminals connected to infinite streams of content, always online, always consuming, always tired. But there's another layer to this that's even more unsettling. The addiction economy doesn't just monetize attention, it monetizes meaning itself. Look at modern culture carefully. People increasingly replace real purpose with digital substitutes. Community becomes followers, achievement becomes visibility, wisdom becomes content, identity becomes aesthetics. Love becomes validation metrics. Even rebellion becomes marketable. Every subculture eventually becomes branding. Every emotion becomes content. Every personal struggle becomes monetizable. And once everything becomes content, nothing feels sacred anymore. That's why many people secretly feel hollow despite constant stimulation. Because human beings need experiences that are real, unmeasured, unrecorded, private. But modern culture pushes people toward permanent exhibition, permanent visibility, and visibility changes behavior. People begin performing life instead of inhabiting it, which creates a strange emotional emptiness. You can gain followers, yet feel invisible, receive attention, yet feel unknown, consume endless entertainment, yet feel chronically bored, because stimulation and fulfillment are not the same thing. In fact, they often move in opposite directions. The more overstimulated people become, the harder genuine meaning becomes to feel. Real fulfillment usually emerges slowly. Relationships, mastery, purpose, presence, but algorithms reward immediacy. Quick dopamine, instant emotional reaction, which conditions people to lose patience with real life itself. And real life is slower than the internet. Real relationships are slower. Real growth is slower. Real happiness is quieter. But quiet emotions struggle to compete against algorithmic stimulation. So people keep returning to the feed. Again, searching for something they can't quite name. Maybe distraction. Maybe validation. Maybe relief from themselves. But underneath all of it, many people are searching for meaning. Because despite all modern convenience, something feels fundamentally wrong. People can sense it intuitively. Why do we feel emotionally drained all the time? Why does life feel strangely unreal online? Why does endless entertainment still leave people empty? Why are anxiety and loneliness exploding in the most technologically connected society ever created? Maybe because human beings accidentally built systems optimized for engagement instead of human flourishing. And those are not the same thing. A system optimized for flourishing would encourage depth, rest, community, attention, mental clarity. But systems optimized for engagement encourage compulsive behavior, emotional volatility, comparison, dependency, and endless consumption. The terrifying part is, this model works incredibly well. The more emotionally unstable society becomes, the more profitable digital escapism becomes. People feel stressed, so they scroll. Scrolling increases stress, so they consume more distraction. The loop feeds itself endlessly. And corporations don't necessarily need evil intentions for this to happen. That's what makes the situation so complicated. Most systems aren't driven by morality. They're driven by incentives. And the incentive is simple. Capture human attention at all costs, even if it destroys focus, even if it increases depression, even if it fragments society psychologically. Because publicly traded companies are rewarded for growth, not emotional well-being. Which means the addiction economy naturally intensifies over time. More personalization, more stimulation, more psychological optimization, more dependency, especially now that artificial intelligence is accelerating everything. Soon algorithms won't just recommend content. They'll predict emotional vulnerability in real time. Imagine platforms detecting loneliness, then strategically delivering emotionally addictive content precisely when users feel weakest. That future sounds dystopian, but pieces of it already exist, and maybe that's why this conversation matters. Because most people still frame distraction as a personal failure, lack of discipline, lack of willpower. But millions of people are fighting systems designed by enormous teams of psychologists, engineers, data scientists, and behavioral experts. That changes the scale entirely. This isn't just you failing to focus, it's an industrial battle for human attention. And right now, the machines are winning. You can feel it in everyday life. People struggle to read books now. Conversations lose depth quickly. Attention spans shrink. Moments feel fragmented. Even memories feel weaker because attention creates memory. And fractured attention creates fractured lives. That may be the real cost of all this. Not wasted time, but diminished existence. Because wherever attention goes, life follows. Your attention determines your reality, what you notice, what you value, what you become. And if your attention is constantly manipulated externally, your life slowly stops feeling internally directed. You drift, react, consume, repeat, until years disappear. That's why so many people suddenly wake up feeling lost in their late 20s and 30s. Not because time moved faster, but because distraction erased conscious presence. They were online constantly, yet absent from their own lives. And maybe that's the cruelest irony of modern addiction. People consume endless content trying to escape emptiness, while the consumption itself deepens the emptiness. Because human beings cannot consume their way into meaning. Meaning requires participation, attention, presence, reality. Things algorithms struggle to monetize, which is why reclaiming attention may become one of the most important psychological acts of the modern era. Not quitting technology completely, that's unrealistic, but becoming conscious again, learning to notice manipulation, learning to tolerate silence again, learning to sit with uncomfortable thoughts without immediately anesthetizing them with stimulation. Because beneath all the noise, many people are terrified. Terrified of stillness. Terrified of confronting themselves. Terrified that without constant distraction, they might realize they aren't actually happy. And maybe modern systems exploit that fear more than anything else. Because a person uncomfortable with their own mind becomes highly controllable. But a person capable of solitude becomes dangerous to the attention economy. Someone who can think deeply, focus intensely, and exist without constant validation is difficult to manipulate. That kind of person consumes less impulsively, reacts less emotionally, needs less external stimulation, and maybe that's why genuine presence feels almost rebellious now. Reading a book for hours, walking without headphones, having uninterrupted conversations, watching a sunset without recording it. These things sound simple, but psychologically, they resist an entire economic system built around distraction. And maybe the future won't be divided by intelligence, or wealth, or even technology. Maybe the real divide will be between people who control their attention and people whose attention is controlled for them. Because attention is no longer just attention. It's identity, reality, consciousness itself. Whatever captures your attention repeatedly eventually captures your life. And right now, millions of people are handing their lives away one scroll at a time. Not because they're stupid, not because they're weak, but because they were born into the first era in human history where billion-dollar systems compete every second to occupy the human mind. An invisible war, quiet enough to feel normal, powerful enough to reshape civilization, and most people still don't realize they're inside it. Maybe that's why modern life feels so strange lately. Everyone is connected. Everyone is stimulated. Everyone is consuming. Yet underneath all the noise, there's this growing feeling that something deeply human is disappearing. Something difficult to measure. Attention spans, presence, depth, inner peace. The ability to simply exist without needing constant input. And if that disappears completely, what kind of people do we become? What happens to a society that can no longer focus, no longer reflect, no longer tolerate silence? Maybe we're about to find out, because the business of keeping you addicted is no longer just business. It's becoming the architecture of modern life.